But I know Socialism for All and Bad Empanada are both trans allies. Blue sky is where you go when you have 15 self-diagnosed mental illnesses and want to be in an echo chamber with other people who also have 15 self-diagnosed mental illnesses. Bad Empanada, you may as well call my friends and I useless eaters at this point. Of course, I legitimately think you should be in the mines. Hi everyone, today we'll be doing one thing only, which is reading the essay, The Price of Rice in China, Our Capital in a Birdcage, on Chinese Socialism. That's all we'll be doing. We'll be reading it from top to bottom, and then stopping at the end to read the footnotes. Before we start, my name is Persephone Vanderwaard. I have my MA in Gothic English Literature and independent PhD in Gothic Poetics and Little Gothic BDSM, focusing partially on Metroidvania, and I am the author of the multi-volume non-profit book series Sex Positivity versus Sex Coercion, or Gothic Communism. If you want to learn more about me and what I do, you can read the rest of this. If you want to support me, you can like, share, and subscribe. However, I also take donations for my work, which goes towards helping sex workers, trans people, and other minorities. I currently take payment on PayPal, Patreon, and Cash App, etc. All links are available on my link tree. Every bit helps. The Price of Rice in China, Our Capital in a Birdcage, on Chinese Socialism. April 20th, nice, 2026. This short piece, part of an upcoming release from my latest book volume, and one, The Post Not the Book, that focuses partly on YouTubers Red Pen and Socialism for All, but also revolutionary thought when it comes to gender politics double standards, see footnotes, addresses criticisms and endorsements of Chinese socialism keeping capital in a birdcage, say nothing of sex work. Socialism for All uses that term when they critique the Chinese and their first stage of socialism being arbitrary, according to them. RE Socialism for All Livestream 131 Deprogram on China, meaning after Mao's pure socialism and subsequent Sino-Soviet Split, Great Chinese Famine, and Cultural Revolution, i.e., it is better to be poor under socialism than rich under capitalism. Red Pen counters, though not directly to Socialism for All, and his own excellent A Critique of Western Marxism. I can't wait to see Red Pen face off against Socialism for All, says one commenter. Let them fight, I feel tempted to reply. I will quickly comment here, but don't know enough on Deng and his successors to speak at length, though neither does Socialism for All, if memory serves. Apart from a short hit piece on Mao, RE Mao's Vampirism, Bad Empanada's favorite dictator from Raising Awareness, and some footnotes on Mao and Dengism, RE Leaving the Closet, I haven't actually spent much time on Chinese socialism, i.e. versus Western Marxism, and Stalinism, de-Stalinized Soviet Marxist-Leninism, RE Raising Awareness, but also Understanding Vampires, and State Vampirism. Even so, I did have a recent exchange that sums it up, which I want to include here, i.e. based off an argument had in the comments section to Red Pen's aforementioned video, who I enjoy for being more critical of Stalin than Socialism for All admittedly is. Much of it is uploaded piecemeal in Skeets and YouTube community posts, so here I have consolidated said exchanges entirety. P.S. I generally enjoy Red Pen's essays critiquing Soviet Russia, e.g. Women at War, Communism. Likewise, Socialism for All is someone who, while I disagree with their frankly Stalinist views and rejection of anarcho-communism, or a 21st century capitalist crisis, I nonetheless appreciate some of their critiques of Dengism, RE Livestream 131, but also the reading of so much older Marxist-Leninist literature in full while annotating it. No small feat. But as Revolutionary Thought says, Lenin wasn't a god, while still highlighting the value in sex work and minority rights, in ways Lenin didn't discount from Are You Actually Revolutionary or Just Performative? None of these men or their critics are above critique, so kill your darlings accordingly. Postscript, my critiques of Marxist-Leninism as being historically sexist, transphobic, whorephobic, etc. already exist in Raising Awareness and State Vampirism. There are some additional critiques like this one in Volume 4's Paratextual Materials, Yesterday's Leftover Rice, i.e. the nationwide porn ban in China being deeply conservative, meaning in ways that leave sex workers relegated to the margins until, maybe, when true communism happens, similar to queer people, re. making Marx gay. This remains an incredibly dubious proposition, and one I would absolutely critique to the same degree as any other socialist state, past or present. Sex work is work. Queer people are people, and anything else is fascist and buries the gay, blames the whore, who don't want to be latter-day socialist DLC, i.e. despite being treated as inherently pornographic in China, Russia, and America, we can do exist in earlier stages of development, re. paid labor. The spirit of my doing so is de facto peer review, turning bad actors into object lessons under Gothic communism as a holistic intersectional refrain, while avoiding Sino-Sophobia and Orientalism, neither infantilizing nor demonizing the Chinese. E.g., gender, culture, race, class, and war. The Gothic communism is a holistic discipline pushing for intersectional consciousness and solidarity, awareness and teamwork under state predation mid abjection. A neologism I coined, one meant to combat various forms of reductionism, class, culture, and race, i.e. by building on Marx's notion of class consciousness, combining class with culture and race consciousness awareness to raise emotional Gothic intelligence while synthesizing praxis. Abridged source paratextual documents. Concerning state vampirism, this piece, essay or otherwise, is part of a larger series on state vampirism. As I conceive it, state vampirism equals feeding to the state mid-abjection, be it openly capitalist or Marxist-Leninist. These are largely questions of aesthetic, whose Promethean self-destructive function extends to other configurations of homos, e.g. Zionism. Furthermore, there's overlap between my anti-Zionist work and my work critiquing Marxist-Leninism, state vampirism alongside capital, so consider reading both. Which state predation and revolutionary action both rely on to function, i.e. on the aegis, as something to further or reverse mid-vampirism through paid-unpaid labor, re. me vis-a-vis Julia Kristeva. To that, abjection, us versus them, alienation, and fetishization is one of four main Gothic theories my book series utilizes, the other three being hauntology, retrofuture, cryptonomy, showhide, and chronotopes, time-space, alongside smaller theories, e.g. Gerald Hogel's Ghost of the Counterfeit, and Barbara Creed's Monstrous Feminine, Gorgons and Amazonamachia, as I study it. As a queer sex worker and academic, I dialectically materially prioritize abjection and vampirism to unpaid labor, chiefly sex work as exploited by Cartesian dualism and its harmful maximalist binaries under capitalist realism, treating nature as monstrous feminine, re. nature is food. But mention the other theories too. Access four main Gothic theories, the 4Gs, and paratextual documents for their longer definitions. In essence, capital, the state, rape by design, which unpaid labor prevents by breaking capitalist realism mid-abjection, i.e. reversing abjection during Little Gothic BDSM, when having the whore's revenge, which state vampirism explores at length. To break the profit and productivity motive by making a world for which it and rape are no longer possible using these methods, i.e. by using the same demonic and slutty language capital does, but at cross purposes. Source, Rape Reprise. Disclaimers. The Price of Rice is part of my Sex Positivity book series, which continues after its June 2025 finale in small form content, e.g. essays on and interviews with other sex workers, all of whom I credit on my acknowledgements pages and sex work page. This piece doesn't focus on sex work itself, but widespread exploitation, i.e. in a shared predatory system, whoring nature and workers out in highly abject ways. For the visually impaired, I will be reading this essay out loud on my YouTube channel, which I'm doing right now. Disclaimer regarding essay contents. All opinions are my own. I use part of my research conducted alongside my book series, Gothic Communism. The material within is written speaks about public figures in popular media for purposes of sex education, satire, transformation, and critique, hence falls under fair use regarding copyright and free speech regarding defamation/obscenity laws. Content warning, transphobia, whorephobia. Regarding criticisms of China, before we start, I will say that I am critical of certain Chinese habits, e.g. poor environmentalism and homophobia, re. hooliganism, see leaving the closet, but again, am less familiar with Dengism and Xi Jinping than Stalin's bullshit. I have heard Parenti describe Chinese socialism as nominal communism in black shirts and reds. While the Chinese government continues under a nominally communist leadership, the process of private capital penetration goes on more or less unhindered. And likewise, I know the Chinese do imperialism versus the Soviets, and Russian Federation has seized them funding ISIS and Israel, re. real-time history and socialism for all. However, I won't focus on that here, but might write future essays on modern post-Mao China. Essay body, the exchange. I digress. The conversation happened in the comments to Red Pen's video, a critique of Western Marxism, shown here alongside visual aids. Me, trans ANCOM, activist and academic, I've been a pretty big critic of Marxist-Leninism and Western Marxism when it comes to the treatment of women, sex workers, and BIPOC, e.g. Socialism for All and Empanada, and those who work with him. I think there are elements to critique in any approach, and some more than others. I enjoyed your videos on women in socialism and fascism in particular. I would love to interview you sometime if you'd like to talk more on women's rights, queer, and sex worker rights. What are you made of? Was there something Socialism for All said or did that reflects a lack of care or misogyny in regards to the treatment of women, sex workers, and BIPOC? Me, his reading of and defending Stalin for starters, whose regime alongside the other Soviet leaders betrayed women, queer folk, and other minorities. Also, his reading of Kollontái's Prostitution and Ways of Fighting It, which I've responded to previously, and the entirety of which appears in Raising Awareness of my State Vampirism series critiquing reactionary, moderate MLs. Sex work is work. Calling it prostitution demonizes it under a criminal lens, monopolizing care and sex work for the state. Also, Kollontai lived in exile under Stalin after he and company killed her compatriots. With the defeat of the workers' opposition, Kollontai appeared to give up her fight for reform and for women, retreating into relative obscurity. With the rise of Stalin, her life became one of de facto exile, though formally she was USSR diplomat for Mexico and Norway before settling in Sweden. She was thus the first female diplomat in Western history. Dying of natural causes in 1952, Kollontai was the only member of the workers' opposition to survive the purges. She lived the last 20 years of her life in constant fear of assassination or imprisonment. Source: Jenny Morrison's Women on the Left, Alexandra Kollontai. A pimp's a pimp. SWERFs are pimps or victims to pimps. Source: YouTube community post, Persephone Vanderwaard, January 30th, 2025. Comrade Marquise, so you don't like China either. Pornography and prostitution are illegal there because it's considered inherently exploitative by the government. I'll have to go listen to those readings and pay extra close attention to the commentary. But I know Socialism for All and Bad Empanada are both trans allies. Socialism for All has streams in which he mentions, covers, and supports trans and queer people from years ago. The idea that Socialism for All is a traitor to women or the queer community seems pretty absurd on its face. Bad Empanada, October 1st, 2025. Blue sky is where you go when you have 15 self-diagnosed mental illnesses and want to be in an echo chamber with other people who also have 15 self-diagnosed mental illnesses. Bad Empanada, you may as well call my friends and I useless eaters at this point. Of course, I legitimately think you should be in the mines. You are a dangerous sex pest, so it's ultimately great for everyone else that you are unemployed and just at home all day writing embarrassing blog posts interspersed with porn of yourself for no reason that no one reads, keeps you away from sexually assaulting people. We desperately need to bring back forced labor. Just keep that in mind as we go, that this is someone who worked alongside Second Thought, Hakim and Yugopnik, who are co-workers of Revolutionary Thought, someone who I've reached out to before as well, and Thought has said nothing about them or about Bad Empanada. They've kept quiet, the lot of them. Me, BE is not a trans ally, RE Raising Awareness, the YouTube version. As for China and its own queerphobic history, hooliganism, and anti-porn laws, I would critique them like any state, socialist or otherwise. As for Socialism for All, he's not as inclusive as he seems. Anyone can say they're inclusive or speak out against open bigotry while excluding the people they claim to defend. In my case, he blocked me as a critic of Stalin's transphobia, doing so in the middle of ICE in Minneapolis. See Exhibit 0 from Onto the Breach. Kind of fucked up. As I wrote about that at the time, Followed SA's content for a while, was watching his critique of the Deprogram and enjoyed it. He told viewers to message on Blue Sky if they had a question. Lo and behold, I am blocked. Never had a conversation with him, so I wonder why. Maybe it's my work on Stalin? If I'm wrong on the Soviet treatment of queer folk and women, please critique my work. In fact, I wanted to ask him for some texts that might challenge my own thesis. Feels a bit swerfy, turfy, especially since he says he takes comments from different Marxists, non-Marxists. Not me, I guess. Sourcegate, Vanderwart Art, March 19th, 2026. Marquise, I can't DM him either because he doesn't follow me. It's honestly super weird you've jumped to the conclusion that he blocked you and isn't an ally. That's wild. Me, further context to that being that he doesn't block people by his own account, and that I was going to him to ask for sources, feedback, and reading material after watching a stream of his where he explains to viewers how to reach him. So I reached out, looking for feedback/thoughts, yet he had blocked me without ever meeting me, which frankly felt odd. Also, I know he blocked me because it says he blocked my account. Marquise, your takes are interesting to say the least. You call yourself an ANCOM, but you sound like a liberal, lolbitarian. Referring to prostitution and ways of fighting it as SWERF is an odd choice, as was your posting of our exchanges on Blue Sky and making community posts on YouTube about it and posting me on your website. Extremely odd behavior. Do you honestly think it better for children and homeless women to be forced into prostitution rather than trained in trades? Very odd take. I'm not opposed to sex workers, but the idea that women should be forced or coerced into selling their bodies for clothes, food, promotions, and or shelter instead of working any other job is an extremely odd one. Me. Women make records of abusive creeps. You're being a creep, acting like a pimp. It's not that hard to understand. Shrug. I'm not opposed to sex work, but the idea that women should be forced or coerced into selling their bodies for clothes, food, promotions, and or shelter instead of working any other job is an extremely odd one. Yeah, and a straw man that you're making. I never said women, or those treated like women, should be forced to do anything. Quite the opposite. I said they should be allowed to do sex work if they want, i.e. versus being forced into the household by the state. Exploiting care sex work is unpaid labor. Clearly you didn't read what I wrote. Anywho, you're obviously bad faith, massively dumb, or both, most like. I'm gonna mute you, make records of this last bit for posterity, and get on with my life. Take care. Just my thoughts and feelings about a side of socialism I have critiqued less than some, i.e., the Chinese pornography and prostitution bans are gross, as are China's ongoing attacks on queer rights, despite decriminalizing homosexuality in 1997 and removal as a mental disorder in 2001. And homophobia and nationalism historically go hand in hand, punching down at queerness as Western and degenerate. R.E. The state is straight and male. R.E. Understanding vampires. We'll see how things shake out in the future. Source, Matt Walsh's Why Chinese Nationalists Have a Homophobia Problem. Footnotes. We'll just read these from top to bottom, and every time I get to one, I'll go back to its corresponding comment before I read the footnote itself. Footnote number 1. Red Pen, who I enjoy for being more critical of Stalin than socialism for all admittedly is, who doesn't like being called a Stalinist if the shoe fits. Footnote 2. I nonetheless appreciate some of their critiques of Dengism and making me aware of others, re. Red Spectres against Dengism. Footnote number 3. But as Revolutionary Thought says, Lenin wasn't a god. a bit of a YouTuber darling who, while I enjoyed their essays, recognized I also work with people who platform bad Empanada, e.g. Second Thought Hakim Agugopnik, who Socialism for all despises, re from raising awareness. In light of this mounting evidence and bad Empanada's flagrant bigotry and grifter hypocrisy, I'm trying to raise awareness regarding his recent actions, but also those supporting him, e.g. bad Empanada, again, calling for slave labor against his critics and labeling minorities useless eaters. See evidence below. The Deprogram and its leads, Second Thought, Hakim, and Gugopnik, continue to endorse bad Empanada anyways, i.e. in The Fire Will Cease featuring bad Empanada, episode 166, above, by keeping said episode up and plugging his stuff, but saying nothing about his recent crash-outs. Beyond failing to police their comrades, Thought does do good work. However, the lack of pushback on Thought's discussing of sex work, minority rights, and GNC people from the community where they operate also hasn't escaped my notice, i.e. a double standard for some people's idea of the Goldilocks GNC person, not too rough around the edges, sexist, ambiphobic, and transmisogynistic. I suppose they're better about shaking hands and kissing babies, rubbing elbows, than I am. I don't kiss ass, I call it like I see it, including with queer comments like Izdahar and Thought, and also Charlytics, re. Anarcho-Communism versus Marxist-Leninism, a critique, or Charlytics, a queer Marxist turf and SWERF below. Some might call it the meat axe approach, and don't want any part. Fair enough. I call it growing a spine, to go after tokenism, criticizing those with the state's dick in their mouth or fangs on their neck, like I would anyone, i.e. regardless of the penetration, degree of selling out taking place, re. state vampirism. You scratch a SWERF and a fascist bleeds. Update. February 1st, 2026. He blocked the video for defamation claims, above. Nothing says, I am really smart and correct, like abusing YouTube censors to silence criticism. Imagine this kind of thin-skinned behavior in academia, blocking rival argument on reactionary grounds, while also playing the victim card, re. Darvo. Fascism betrays the austerity to conduct imperialism in bad faith, and does so regardless of cosmetic, re. Hitler's Nazi Germany or Stalin's Soviet Russia. Classic. Sourcegeet, Vanderward Art, February 1st, 2026. In response, I've chosen to focus on something more positive. Chief, the very identity politics this person devalues, which I tied to class culture and race struggle across a polity of marginalized people, e.g. immigrants, emancipated slaves and their descendants, indigenous peoples, and various marginalities of class culture and race. Persephone Vanderwart's The Value in Showing Intersectional Solidarity when Combating Fascism, 2026. Tokens have had plenty of time and been given plenty of evidence to say something, re. raising awareness. Instead, they've said promptly fuck all, and my patience has run its course. Call me rude, I frankly don't care. I have already been called rapist, degenerate, useless eater, and counter-revolutionary despite devoting my life to the cause, and being a rape survivor and granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor who uses my knowledge and book series to reduce harm. Welcome to academia. Criticism is vital to change, and if you don't like that, maybe an academic approach isn't your speed. Tough shit. Transgenocide is happening right now, and I'm not going to wear kid gloves for anyone, e.g. Dead on Arrival or Rawlings' Autopsy and Those Who Shall Her, 2026. But you'd be surprised who tone polices and who doesn't when push comes to shove. Everyone has bias. Draw blood and see if it's fascist. The scratching method, re. raising awareness. Accepting FD Signifier, who it must be said, said something publicly about bad Empanada on a smaller side channel, but I'll take what I can get. Quote, P.S. If you want another minority to critique bad Empanada besides my white trans ass, consider what FD Signifier has to say about him, above. If bad Empanada had a PhD and wrote some books, he'd be Norm Finkelstein. Norm Finkelstein is a professional edgelord, white liberal. Problematic white guy tier list, 2026. Yep. FD continues. At the end of the day, bad Empanada says a lot of shit, and I'm like, yeah, but he's so spicy up his own debate bro ass that every third time he talks, he's going to say something where you're like, what are you talking about? Verily. Source, concerning Venezuela. To that, there's definitely a double standard with thought's inability to say the quiet part out loud, i.e., trans women are treated like whores, men in dresses, but thought's placed on a Kalanta-esque pedestal, mainly because, as far as I understand it, they don't actually do sex work themselves, and don't rock the boat as much as I do. Just an observation. Many MLs are comfy talking about these things in abstract, but when they actually encounter a sex worker or trans woman critical of socialism as being exclusionary of unpaid labor, meaning in ways that don't deify Marx, Stalin, and Mao, etc., they can grow reliably curt, nasty, and deceptive. R.E. This is not transphobic. Socialism is a historical necessity and the genuine liberation of LGBTQ plus people everywhere, not just in the first world, and only Marxism-Leninism can achieve and maintain socialism. Sex work is also inherently awful and demeaning. The majority of prostitutes are forced into it because they have literally no other option, and if you do it willingly, you are participating in a system that brings down your gender, as all pornography is inherently harmful to society and to human happiness. Neither pornography nor any other form of sex work, sexual slavery, will exist under communism. Source: comments for YouTube community post, Persephone Vanderwaard, January 29, 2026. In other words, not all commies are alike. An uppity trans woman gets lambasted for taking a blowtorch to other commies' sacred cows. Is par for the course. The ANCOM, historically targeted by MLs. See Bad Mouse's Why I Left Anarchism and Then Came Back. I ain't no Goldilocks, and I don't pull punches for anyone. Then again, thought strikes me as a bit toothless, as many YouTubers do. Ari, when it comes to actually critiquing her co-workers. Instead, they play the game, as it were, a bit of a chameleon. They make YouTube videos, and money. I write books, and generally irreverent, iconoclastic ones. Silence is genocide, segregation no defense, and assimilation poor stewardship. The state is almost for whores, queer folk, and other minorities, my dudes, so speak out already. Otherwise, you're just a cop playing the rebel and making exceptions that undercut our collective rights. R.A. Parenti's false rebellion with more masks. A bigotry for one is a bigotry for all. Footnote number 4. I have heard Parenti describe Chinese socialism as nominal communism in black shirts and reds, which, if memory serves, Red Pen in their video mentions. Ironic given Red Pen cites Parenti to defend China, but academia is often a shop for broken clocks, a Parenti a Western Marxist. That being said, I like how they mention Rockhill's Who Paid the Pipers of Western Marxism. Footnote number 5. Quite the opposite. I said they should be allowed to do sex work if they want, i.e. versus being forced into the household by the state, exploiting care. Sex work is unpaid labor. Something socialism and socialist realism are historically guilty of, past and present. RE state vampirism. See also critiquing Soviet aesthetics during socialist realism from raising awareness. E.g. Lady Istihar saying in The Rights of the U.S. Still Won't Guarantee. What if I told you that in 1936 the Soviet Union legally guaranteed gender equality, racial equality, work, rest, and education? Similar to racism in the United States, though. Legal guarantees by a given state don't preclude mistreatment of marginalities by the guarantor, who can either lie, renege on a promise, or refuse to give it outright. E.g., queer people were abused and censored by Soviet power before it recriminalized homosexuality. As such, rule of law is just a promise by the state not to harm workers, a promise it happily breaks all the time to bolster its own position within capital, the nuclear model, and some such realism, as I respond to Istihar's video. In 1936, the Soviet Union also made abortion illegal and made it harder to divorce one's husband. 2 years prior, they had also made homosexuality illegal under Stalin and company. Queer women were often institutionalized, while the exact treatment of queer people, cis or otherwise, varies throughout the Union. Homosexuality was illegal until after the fall in the early 90s. Abortions were legalized in 1955, after Stalin died. Guarantees don't preclude abuse, especially from bad actors tied to various motives, e.g. profit and productivity. The U.S. sucks in this respect, obviously, but the Soviets' treatment of women and queer people has been pretty uneven over time and generally remains concerned with the state apparatus and household. Source: YouTube community post, Persephone Vanderwaard, 2/12/2026. There's also bias, e.g., it also bears repeating that Izdihar's revolutionary chart left out academics, care work, sex workers, and starving artists, though she did invite others to expand on her chart below. Source YouTube community post Persephone Vanderward, January 2026, artist Lady Izdihar. To that, critique dictators and their various dogmas like you would anyone, including those defending them to prevent, on purpose or by accident, to any degree of faith in state power, liberation for all, above. Rape is rape, and if someone responds conservatively to a critique of their favorite dictator by you, including by punching down at queer people, women, and sex workers by gaslighting them, they're embodying the very people that tell you their heroes aren't. Dictators, cops, pimps, tyrants. If anyone should be critiqued, it's people like them, i.e. those who treat imperialism as revolution while defaming sex work and queerness as inherently bourgeois and making open fascism their strange bedfellows. A pimp's a pimp, and pimps are cops conducting state vampirism. Dictators are cops, abjecting and raping by design whoever they need to help the state feed, generally through imperialism at home or abroad in some shape or form. The state is straight, white, and male, but also paid, R.E. Patel and more. To ask for capitalism to pay for care is to call for an end to capitalism. Apologia and willful ignorance take many forms. Neither Izdihar nor Thought have said anything to critique bad Empanada, for example, not to my knowledge anyways, but Socialism for All has his own SWERFy flaws. To it, there are limits to YouTube, which gags discussions on sex, a topic policed more than anything else, but also expecting a given strata of discourse to police itself, especially when it has a particular class character that historically decays when tempted by the state, is a fool's errand. Silence can be bought, consent manufactured, what Edward Said called the accommodated intellectual. A pedagogy of the oppressed means we have to hold each other accountable, meaning as people with variable ratios and flavors of privilege oppression, i.e., we have to be able to critique those who tokenize with a red veneer just as much as those on the American side of social justice, e.g. FD Signifier and Foreign Man in a foreign land shilling philosophy tube, aka Abigail Thorne, a liberal Zionist pinkwashing American imperialism, which sees two straight African-American men defend, to a degree, their token co-worker apologizing for Israel, R.A. sharing the blame. People who do socialism for all later are sellouts. Footnote number 6. Homophobia and nationalism historically go hand in hand, punching down at queerness as Western and degenerate. Obscurantism from the eastern side of the coin, writes Matt Walsh, not that Matt, and why Chinese nationalists have a homophobia problem. Last week, a women's baseball coach at a central Chinese university posted a photograph online showing two students holding an anti-gay banner on school grounds. Keep homosexuality far from the university campus, it read, the golden characters in red background calling to mind the colors of China's national flag. Protect Chinese traditional mores, defend core socialist values, restrict corrosion from decadent Western thoughts. And this was in 2017. The point being, protests happened because of repression, which dates back, for China, many centuries, explains the gay biz. Quote, the first anti-gay law that we see in China dates from the Song dynasty, about 1,000 years after this, during the Zheng He era, 1111 to 1118. Westernization would also seem to explain why homosexuality became more and more stigmatized during the time of the self-strengthening movement, which focused on westernizing China, and throughout the late Qing and Republican period. The Western view of homosexuality as pathological, feminine, and weak cast the Chinese homosexual tradition as part of a fundamental weakness of a fat and weak Chinese culture to be swept aside and replaced if China wanted to survive and compete with the West. This was connected to the common stereotype of Western men as effeminate. Just after the collapse of the Qing, protests were staged by actors against the master-servant system, which had often led to exploitative same-sex liaisons. During the Mao era, homosexuality was seen as a form of deviant sexuality in a world where sex was strictly for procreation, but this had more to do with communist ideas of the family as a cell of society. R.E. Patel and Moore's 16th century ecology, and John the Duncan's universal class subject as white, male, straight, and paid. See State Vampirism, footnote 1, and a Gothicist response to woke is dead. R.E. timestamp 2/1802. On the face of it, then, Westernization seems to be the major factor behind the termination of the Chinese homosexual tradition. However, it is important to remember the currents of homophobia that ran through Chinese society long before the West arrived on the scene. Societal movements do not tend to come out of nowhere. If there was a genuine desire among the Chinese population for the diminishment of LGBTQ relationships, this was probably not just suddenly prompted by the arrival of the West. Source: Reddit, R.E. Ask historians, is homophobia in China primarily a result of Western influence, or did it have any homegrown component? 2020. Regarding the state being white, racism doesn't stop with socialism, FD Signifier correctly says. Racism has always undermined leftist movements. Indeed, racism is already extant, says Andrew Lee, which he calls a tool used by the rich and powerful to divide the working class, who think that once the working class unites and overthrows the capitalist, racism will be over. But it's the exact opposite. It's a weakness that only is exploited by the bourgeoisie because racism is already extant. Even if there were to be a revolution, the resulting communist government would be divided among ethnic lines and favor the dominant culture. Source: How Heavy Metal Upholds White Supremacy. In which I concur, albeit among a polity of cultures east and west, RE is metal racist. The elite have many tools to divide and conquer with. From Marx to me, capital alienates and sexualizes everything. It monopolizes violence, terror, and morphological expression, monsters, through sex and force. R.E. Weber, Asprey, and me see the state its key tools from paratextual documents, and its qualities through the state are secular colonial, heteronormative, and Cartesian, and through different imbrications of modular persecution language, e.g. blood libel, witchcraft, and sodomy through whores policing whores, i.e. for the pimp and their revenge, stealing power from the past, the Promethean quest, divide and conquer, r.e. idle hands, policing the whore and rape reprise. Again, skull equals theft, and flow of power determines function for workers or the state. Workers can further enforce objection to flow power up mid-predation, or they can play with rape and its symbols to change polarity during ludogothic BDSM. Source: Dead on Arrival. Under state vampirism, they do so across generations and geopolitics under capitalist and socialist realism. In turn, problems of race overlap with culture, sex, gender, and class, intersectional problems requiring intersectional solutions, consciousness and solidarity, awareness, and teamwork. A. No reductionism nor homeless whores, which queer people and other minorities generally are, including in socialist states giving them optional temporary rights. Furthermore, much of queerphobia exists in media, and not just in China, e.g. Japan. R.E. Room for both horror and social commentary in 3 Japanese classics. A. The state controls sex in heteronormative ways, is similar to the West in its own ancient canonical codes, growing more aggressive under capital. The Protestant ethic existed in some shape or form in Asia before Western interference. Queerness is alien, something to pimp and police by national forces that, under fascism, merge with corporations and the market to pimp nature. R.E. State vampirism. Queerness and sex work are just another contradiction within those forces, while China and Japan below stigmatizing cattle like their Western counterparts. R.E. Nature is monstrous feminine, something to pimp for productivity and profit. Thank you again for watching. If you appreciate the work that I do, you can like, share, and subscribe, like I said. However, again, I also take donations for my work, which goes towards helping sex workers, trans people, and other minorities facing state abuse. I currently take payment of Patreon, PayPal, and Cash App, etc. All links are available on my Linktree. Every bit helps. Until next time, thank you for listening, reading, following, etc. And stay safe out there.